Shabbat Shalom. This past week, my family and I marked my Gramma Fay's third yahrzeit. I speak about her each year at this time, and I thought about her a great deal this past week. Her apartment was a one-bedroom, and she would sit at her dining room table and read. Her table was filled with piles of newspapers and mailings from different Jewish organizations from around the world. She read every single piece of mail, and she read every story in the paper cover to cover. And she always loved, above all else, the Dear Abby column. She loved the columns, and Gramma Fay took great pride in knowing that the author of all of this wisdom was Jewish. I remember Gramma Fay telling me about some of the problems of the people who wrote in to Dear Abby. This week, to feel Gramma Fay again, I Googled Dear Abby columns and read some of her most popular advice. Dear Abby, our son was married in January. 5 months later, his wife had an 8.5-pound baby girl. They said the baby was premature. Tell me, can a baby this big be that early? Signed, Wondering. Dear Wondering, the baby was on time, the wedding was late. Dear Abby, I have always wanted to have my family history traced, but I can't afford to spend a lot of money to do it. Any suggestions? Signed, Sam in Cal. Dear Sam, yes, run for public office. Gramma Fay always told me about the Dear Abby columns. And to be honest, at the time when she told me about them, I thought the columns were ridiculous. But Grandma found the advice column meaningful and fun. Grandma had deep empathy for others, especially Jewish people around the world. Before there were hyperlinks and videos, she read the news in an almost interactive way. You could tell by her face what kind of articles she was reading. She'd look sad or excited. And I know so many in this room read the news that way because so many of you forward me articles on a weekly or even daily basis. Sometimes Grandma would read news about Israel and shake her head, and she'd ask, how could God let this happen to Jews living in Israel? And I was never sure as a child if she was looking for a book of theology or if she was looking for a Dear Abby response. I heard Grandma's voice this week as I read over and over and over again about the murders of the Israelis Ziv Hajbi, 35, and Kim Levengrad Yechezkel, 28. Ziv Hajbi is survived by a wife and 3 young children. Kim Levengrad Yechezkel is survived by a husband and a 15-month-old baby son. May their memories always be for a blessing. The more I read about them, the more I hear Grandma ask, how could God let this happen to Jews living in Israel? And I remember thinking in those moments how Grandma could even ask that after she was locked up in the Lodz ghetto and after being an inmate in Auschwitz and after she watched her mother and all of her younger siblings selected directly off the freight trains for gassing. I remember thinking, how could you ask how God could let this happen to them when so much has happened to you, to our family? We don't think about this enough, but the Nazis might have destroyed European Jewry, murdered our family. Her entire world in Lodz might have been annihilated. But they couldn't strip away Grandma's compassion, her empathy for others' pain. And I thought about it this week as I read Parshat Noach. You see, Noach watches as the entire world is destroyed around him in a flood, And then suddenly the flood and the destruction is over. And Noah gets out of the ark. And there's a strange episode in which Noah plants a vineyard. Noah becomes drunk and falls asleep in his tent naked. Vayarcham avi Chanaan et ervat avi vayagid lishnei echav bachutz. And Noah's son Ham sees his father laying there naked. And the first thing he does is he tells his brothers. And his brothers, Shem and Yafet, take a cloth and cover their father without looking at his nakedness. Unlike Ham, Shem and Yafet don't need to stand there and discuss it in the Torah. They express compassion and immediately act through the covering of their father. They show compassion for pain in their family after witnessing so much destruction themselves. The episode beckons each of us to stand there and gaze at our own family's issues and consider how we ourselves react. Is our first impulse to go tell others about another's challenge, to talk, to gossip? Or is our impulse to express compassion in the moment and simply offer help? And before we all pat ourselves on the back for knowing the right answer, please keep in mind the weight of the flood and the destruction of all living things, in Noah's case and also in Gramma Fay's. Can we imagine being compassionate after experiencing so much devastation ourselves? Sometimes I'll discuss tragedy like these murders of innocent Israelis early in the service. And occasionally, not usually, but occasionally, somebody will come to me during Kiddush or during the week, and they'll tell me that hearing it before the Shema was jarring and distracting. And that's exactly what I intended to do. Because this sanctuary, this is a place that's supposed to make us more empathetic to the pain of others, more sensitive to the pain of our brothers and sisters around the world. And I'm sorry to say that the families of Ziv Hajbi and Kevin Levengran Yechezkel didn't have a choice of feeling one way or the other, and neither should we, because we are their family. We can't shut that out. Gramma Fay didn't have a choice, and she continued to remain open to feeling the pain of so many. Noah and his family didn't have a choice, and it clearly affects them after the flood is over. The Torah presents for us in that episode the right path and the other path. It's difficult to feel open and empathetic all the time. None of us can accomplish such a task, but we need reminders, especially this week as we watch flooding and destruction and devastation unfold in Florida with Hurricane Michael. With all of the problems of our week, large and small, can we come to synagogue and open our hearts to feel for the other, for the rest of the world, for the rest of the Jewish people? It all comes back to the advice column. From where do we draw meaning? From hearing the story of another's problem, or from feeling something assuring about the advice, about the knowledge, about the wisdom at the end of the column? A place where we can turn to find pithy wisdom from our neighbors. But the advice column is only a reflection of what we're all really searching for through the times of Noah and Gramma Fay into the here and now. We want somebody to listen, somebody to open their heart, somebody to empathize after we encounter bad or difficult news. Can we feel the pain and the loss of our neighbor after their devastation? Can we sit with one another and hear these stories without politics, without agenda, without assigning blame, and just empathize with their pain? This was Gramma Fay's gift. She simply listened to us and actually to everybody else. She cried about stories we told her and even about a mailing she'd received from a charity. She prayed for family, for Jews everywhere, for people all around the world. Her heart was big enough for all of it. I know because at the end of every single conversation I ever had with her in my entire life, she ended it by saying 3 times, "I love you, I love you, I love you." And over the last several weeks, as I read the news and listen to the way that people speak with one another on television or even when we bring our kids to activities, I've come to realize that what the world needs now more than ever is Gramma Fay. We cannot allow compassion, empathy, and love to simply fall away. Now more than ever, we need Gramma Fay in our lives. We need to open up. We need to listen. Sometimes we might even need to hold one another and cry. And then we need to say, "I love you, I love you, I love you." May the memory of Gramma Fay, Fay gereisel bat Yitzchak Eliash v'Chaya Sarah, continue to be a blessing for my family, for our entire community, for the Jewish people, and for the entire world. And let us all say, Amen. Amen.